Okay, so safe rooms, huh? It's one of those things, you start thinking about, maybe I should actually do this.
Yeah.
And then it's like, whoa, where do I even begin?
It can feel like a lot, especially if you're just starting to, think about preparedness in general.
Exactly. Like, I feel like I've got a decent handle on emergency kits and stuff, but a whole room.
Different ballpark for
Right. So luckily, FEMA to the rescue, as always.
always.
They've got this guide, Taking Shelter from the Storm, super detailed, and it's all about safe rooms.
It's the roadmap you need, really, if you're serious about building one.
And let me tell you, this guide was full of surprises. For example, I always pictured tornadoes, like making houses explode inwards from the wind.
Oh, yeah, the classic image.
But it turns out that's not really how it works.
Nope. This guide set me straight, too. It's more like, imagine the wind is so strong it turns the house kind of inside OT.
Whoa.
Right. So like reinforcing your basement windows, which a lot of folks do.
Makes sense. Seems like a good first step.
It is a good step for general safety, but against that kind of force, not enough for a safe room.
So we're talking about a structure built to a whole other level than even regular building codes.
Exactly. Safe rooms are held to this incredibly high standard because they have to be. We're not even just talking wind either.
Oh, right. The flying debris.
Exactly. Think 2x4, just a hunk of wood, right? Now imagine it's going 100 miles an hour.
Oh, God.
That's what this room has to stop.
Suddenly, that whole exploding house image makes a lot more sense.
Puts it in perspective.
Speaking of perspective, this guide really changed mine when it comes to risk assessment. I thought I had a good idea of like tornado alley, hurricane zones,
We all think we do.
but they break it down by these wind zones, and it's not always intuitive. Like, did you know hurricane zones have their own tornado risks on top of that?
Yep. Overlapping threats. And even if you're thinking, oh, I'm not in those zones, those lines can move.
Right, really. The zones themselves change.
As more data gets collected, they update. Climate's always doing something, right? So this guide really hammers home personal risk assessment. Can't just go by the general area.
So even if I think I know my risk, gotta double check. Makes sense.
And it's not just about where you live. It's about your property, your situation. Got a basement? No basement? How many people need to shelter? All that factors in.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Nope. And even if your risk is, like, statistically LOW, your comfort level matters. Some folks are just more anxious during storms.
Oh, totally. I hadn't even thought about that, but it makes sense.
That peace of mind factor is huge.
Totally. Okay, so let's say I've assessed my risk, and I'm thinking, yeah, safe room's a good idea. Where does it even go?
$1 million question. Location, 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 as they say.
See, I would thought basement done, but this guide opened my eyes. Flood zones, for example. Never occurred to me.
Yeah. People think tornado, they don't think flood. But those storms, they bring the rain too. Basements aren't always the answer. And it's not just about the water itself, right? Like, oh, my safe room's flooded.
All right, that's bad enough.
But that water, it can undermine the foundation of the safe room. Makes the whole thing weaker exactly when you need it strong.
Yikes. Okay, so flood zones, noted. Anything else about placement I wouldn't have thought of?
Accessibility. You'd be surprised how often that gets overlooked.
Like I can physically get to it when the sirens are blaring.
Exactly. The guide actually has this rule, 150 feet for exterior safe rooms.
Meaning?
If it's separate from your house, got to be reachable within 150 feet. So walkways, landscaping, that all matters.
Huh. Never would have considered that. Okay, so I'm in the safe room, crisis averted, but am I comfortable?
That's where size comes in.
Right. 3 square feet per person for tornadoes, that's the rule of thumb I've heard.
Guide mentions that, but it also says for hurricanes, more space is recommended.
Oh, interesting. Why the difference? A storm's a storm, right?
Tornadoes, they're over quick, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Hurricanes, you could be in that room for days.
Makes sense. Claustrophobia in a crisis is not going to help.
Exactly. A little extra room, maybe you can store some supplies, make a big difference mentally.
So we've got location, we've got size, now the actual building part, new homes. Seems like adding it during construction's the way to go.
Oh, 1,000 times easier. If you're planning a new build, get that safe room in the blueprints from day one.
But what about retrofitting? I've got an older house. Is that even possible?
Absolutely. Might take some extra work, but this FEMA guide actually lays out different methods.
One that caught my eye was tying the safe room into existing CMU walls.
Ah, yes. For folks at home, CMU concrete masonry unit. Those concrete blocks a lot of basements are made of.
So using what's already there, integrating into the house's structure.
Precisely. Now, it ain't exactly beginner DIY,
No.
but the guide explains it well. Even I understood it.
And you're not like a contractor or anything.
Nope. That's why I appreciated how clear the guide is. But one area where it gets tricky, no matter how good the guide, is foundations.
Ah, yes. The foundation. Always essential, always overlooked until it's a problem.
In safe rooms, they put unique stress on foundations, especially during those high winds.
So what you're saying is, my existing concrete slab probably not going to cut it.
It might, but the guide talks about potential need for reinforcement or even full replacement, especially with lighter weight safe rooms.
Ironic, right. Want it strong up top, gotta beef up the bottom even more.
Physics is F-fun-N. But yeah, last thing you want is your safe room compromising the house's structure.
Totally defeats the purpose. Okay, so the elephant in the room, cost. How much are we really talking here?
Everyone wants to know, and the guide's upfront about it. Safe rooms, not cheap.
Lay it on me.
Their estimate, basic 8x8 room, starts around $9,400. Doesn't even include the door, which obviously key component.
Yeah, no flimsy door on a bunker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go up to a 14x14 room. Now you're looking at $25,500, potentially more.
Okay, so those are starting points. What else factors into the final price tag?
Location, for one. Materials used, big one. Complex foundation work, adds up fast. But there is some good news, potentially.
Oh, do tell.
FEMA funding. It exists. Guide mentions it as a way to make safe rooms more accessible.
Hold up, FEMA gives money for this specifically.
Certain conditions apply, gotta qualify, but it's worth looking into. And speaking of worth looking into, Guide tackles some myths about those prefabricated shelters.
Oh, the ready-made ones you see advertised? Figured those be cheaper. Sometimes. But there's this misconception. Prefabricated means no foundation needed. Absolutely not true.
So even if I'm not building brick by brick, that base still gotta be rock solid.
Guide stresses that hard. Prefab doesn't mean ignoring the laws of physics.
Right, like it's not just gonna magically float there and be safe, gotta be anchored.
Exactly. Physics applies to everyone, prefab or custom built. Speaking of which, one thing that struck me about this guide,
Yeah.
it's not just about like concrete and rebar, you know? It's almost like shifting how we think about safety.
Oh, interesting. Expand on that.
Well, it's easy to think of safe rooms as like extreme, right? Only for certain places, certain people.
Yeah, like the doomsday prepper stereotype.
But this guide, it's almost saying with weather getting wilder, maybe it's not extreme, maybe it's just sensible.
Adapting to a new reality.
Yeah.
I like that. And even if, knock on wood, you never need it for a tornado, hurricane, whatever.
Right.
Having that space, just knowing it's there, that's peace of mind you can't put a price tag on.
Totally. So it's not just about surviving the storm, it's about weathering it, like mentally too.
Exactly. And that got me thinking, you know, this guide has actual design plans in it.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask about those.
Different types, sizes, all FEMA approved, right?
Yep.
Made me think, what if this whole safe room thing went mainstream?
Instead of hiding in the basement, it's part of the house.
More than that, what if it was like desirable? Builders showcased it.
Oh, like, and this is our peace of mind suite.
Right. Could be an office, playroom, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But T, also the strongest point in the house.
Multi-purpose.
Yeah.
So listeners, what do you think? Is this nuts or is this the future?
Let us know on social media. We want to hear your take.
This deep dive, we've just scratched the surface. FEMA Guide's free, folks. Go get it. Could save your life.
No exaggeration. Knowledge is power, especially when it's this important.
And you know what? Building that safe room, it's not just about bricks and mortar. It's about building resilience as a community.
Oh, I like that. Because in a crisis, it's not every man for himself, right? It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe those design plans, they're not just blueprints for a room, but for something bigger, you know?
Stronger together, that's what it comes down to. Both literally and figuratively.
On that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive, but keep the conversation going online. Let us know your thoughts.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And remember, whether it's a concrete bunker or just a mental space, investing in peace of mind, always a good idea.